edition of the talk show on October 20th, 2007. Right now.
Okay, thank you. Again, good morning. My name is Vicki Meyer, and I am the endorsed Republican candidate for First Selectman for Plainfield. I have the strength and proven leadership abilities to be Plainfield's First Selectman. It has been my privilege to serve for the last 10 years on the Board of Finance, and the last several as chairman. Additionally, I have nearly 25 years of working for non-profit social service agencies has provided me with the necessary advocacy, negotiation, fiscal management, and grant writing skills. As I meet more and more people of Plainfield, I hear two themes. One, of course, is they don't want to. The other is that there's nothing for families to do in town. It's also a fact that the majority of workers living in Plainfield travel outside of town for their employment. We need fiscal stability in Plainfield before we can assess a plan of growth. One of my goals as First Selectman is to work toward a clearer and more informative budget. I've discussed this with the audit team and the finance director, and we will be creating a completely different budget format, one that will pool town resources and provide clarity of spending town-wide rather than department by department. We need to attract business that will bring in tax dollars and support a plan of development that will best serve the residents of Plainfield. I think a change in leadership will help facilitate this. What has been lacking is the thoughtful, sound, responsible leadership which I intend to provide. A newer and fresher approach is a good thing. What this will be specifically will be determined as I get to know more about how the town's past efforts to recruit new business failed. I pride myself in my ability to negotiate situations to obtain a positive outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tendrich. And I got that right that time, I hope.
Yes,
2 minutes,
you did,
please.
Bob. Thank
2
you.
minutes.
Thank you. I'm Kathy Tendrich, your endorsed Democratic candidate for First Selectman. Thank you, WINY, for hosting the debate. I've been a resident of Plainfield for 40 years. My children were raised here, my family was raised here, and now my grandchildren are being raised here. I want a brighter future not only for my family, but for your family too. As your First Selectman, I will work hard to create a strong economy for Plainfield. With my 26 years of business experience and my volunteer experience as president of the Plainfield Business Association, I have worked hard for the local businesses and understand their needs. I will work to attract new business into our community by exploring shorter turnaround time on permits, by creating a strong economic development committee with the expertise needed to create a friendly small business environment within our town hall. I'll look to bring back the small business loan, which helped create me to expand my business. In creating a strong economic development committee that will plan for the future to hire an expertise economic development person. As First Selectman, I will support public safety. I will work hard to bring back the drug program into our schools, the neighborhood watch programs to our communities, and to develop a solid working relationship with our police department. I support our education department. It's important that we have a strong school system. I will pursue partnerships with employers to create internships, summer work programs, and on-the-job training programs to fill the skill gaps. On November 7th, I ask, please let your voice be heard and vote for Kathy Tendrich for First Selectman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reel, 2 minutes, please.
My name is Dan Reel. I am the Libertarian candidate for First Selectman Plainfield. I'm also the taxpayer's best friend, and I will be the most advocate, staunch watchdog that the taxpayers of Plainfield have ever seen and probably will ever see for a very long time. I'm a paralegal by trade. I specialize in foreclosures, complex litigation, a lot of fun other stuff, but as far as why I'm running, there's a lot of hope and there's a lot of promise for Plainfield, but unfortunately we have to break with the traditional approach of let's see what we can tax, let's see what we can regulate, let's see how much money we can borrow. I mean, we have so much potential in Plainfield, and if we just live within our means, we can keep the advantage of having taxes low, and we can start doing other things like getting Interroyal going, for example, getting the command property up and running, you know, fixing that train that's always blocking the post office. I mean, there's a lot of exciting things that I'm prepared to bring and will actually happen. And, you know, once we see it up and running, it's going to be very exciting. And one of the first things I'm going to do is we're going to have a full audit, you know, for full transparency for the purposes of Freedom of Information Act. And the first thing I'm going to do at the first Board of Selectmen meeting is we are cutting the salary for First Selectman from $72,000 to $55,000. I believe their cuts are going to be necessary, and I'm willing to share, and, you know, that's just part of the job. So let's look forward to a good debate here and see what we can get accomplished.
Thank you. Mr. Cunningham, 2 minutes, please.
And good morning. Welcome all the other candidates as well, and thank WINY for hosting for today. And I wanted to start off by saying I am Kevin Cunningham. I'm a write-in candidate for this upcoming election. And I wanted to let you know that you have to make no mistake, every single part of our town government has to be worked on, has to be supported, and streamlined, and encourage all of the staff to do their duties. The issue that we're facing right now, obviously, is our state budget. And the state budget woes, they fall down upon the town, and it means we have to work smarter. That's just the way it is. We need to make better decisions from the top down. You, the voters, need to choose a person who is knowledgeable in all aspects of government, willing to fight for your town every day. That person needs to work with Plainfield, to be Plainfield's voice, to be heard in Hartford. And we still have to be able to run daily operations. So we're looking obviously for your support, because we're looking for support for all of the police, for safety, encourage the support for the school system so they can propel to new heights, revamp our recreation department and senior programs, hire back an economic developer because we need businesses to make our economic development work. Obviously, work with getting back the Economic Development Committee. And most importantly, is what we've just seen recently, is to fix our town charter. It is failing. I just want to let you know that I have the insight. I've worked this position for 2 years. I know that I did an excellent job during those 2 years. And I just wanted to say that we've worked very hard to decrease the budget my first year from what it was the previous. So I know how to cut budgets. I know how to work with budgets. I know in these difficult times, you're going to need a strong leader, someone who has knowledge and experience. And I see that I am that candidate for you, and I hope that you consider me on November 7th.
Thank you. The first question will be as follows, and Ms. Meyer will be the first to respond. Like many towns, Plainfield had a very challenging budget season earlier this year, exacerbated by the failure of the state to pass its budget. The town of Plainfield is also currently being sued by a citizen after the Board of Selectmen rejected her petition, which she claims is legally valid, to take the 2017-18 municipal budget to another referendum. What is your opinion regarding the 2017-18 fiscal year spending plan that passed in Plainfield in terms of its content, the impact on the mill rate, and how the town approached the process? What, if anything, would you have changed or done differently? And how would you tackle challenging budget seasons in the future? 2 minutes, please.
Well, I think every town in Connecticut faced a very difficult budget season this year. I cannot comment on any ongoing litigation. However, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Education, and the Board of Finance worked very closely together to come up with a budget with the available numbers that we had, which were not really hard numbers. The thing about the budget this year is that we ended up with a 0.87 mil increase, which was our best guess. We have now been looking at ways to cut the budget for this year. The Board of Ed has been contributing up to $1 million in cuts. Hopefully, with this new information coming from Hartford, the pain will stop and we will be able to reinstate some of that money possibly. I don't know what we could have done differently. We did not want to tax the residents any more than we did. We really need the hard numbers in order to come up with the actual budget so that we can move forward with potential cuts or potential savings.
All right, thank you. Ms. Tendrich, 2 minutes, please.
I tend to agree with some of what Vicki said. I do believe, again, being a member of the Board of Finance, we worked hard. The Board of Finance, the Selectmen, the Board of Ed, we worked hard to cut, to bring down the cuts that needed to be. I think what maybe we could have done a little bit different is maybe cut a little bit sooner, as soon as we heard. I think for all of us, you know, we tried to put a lot of thought into it and not affect the school system or really jump too fast before we had solid numbers from the state. But I do think that maybe we could have just put our cuts in a little bit sooner than what we had, maybe looked at it a little bit harder sooner. Again, we worked very hard, all of us together, and I believe we did the best we could with the numbers that we had from the state.
All right, thank you. Mr. Reel, 2 minutes.
Well, I'm going to start by, I believe in my opinion, actually answering the question. I'm going to do it twofold. One, I am a co-plaintiff in that litigation, and the first thing that struck me as absolutely disheartening was the Board of Selectmen took upon itself to disregard the charter, to flagrantly ignore not only the charter but General Statute 7-7, and it pretty much just told the voters, we're going to lord over you and your opinion doesn't matter. Not only did I find that reprehensible, but you can look up the case if you want. It's Shannon Derby v. Board of Selectmen. I'm going to leave the viewer to go check that out. But the bottom line is, you know, the town got caught in a bad position. And as first selectman, when we make a mistake, I'm going to admit it. I'm going to say, we screwed up. I'm not going to try to cover it up. I'm not going to do it like the Board of Selectmen has in this case. And I'm not going to do it like they did in Kolonowski v. DePietro 4 years ago when the superintendent just declared someone to be off the Board of Ed. And we had to go get a writ of quo warranto and a writ of mandamus to throw the wrong person out of the office and put the right person back into the office. Now, as far as me, I'm hands-on. I'm not afraid to take a position. And, you know, I'll weigh the facts. And like I said, if the town makes a mistake, our priority should be fixing it. It shouldn't be sweeping under the rug. And as far as the budget process goes, I just got to say this. You know, the days of free money from Hartford are over. We need to be realistic. And to a great extent, we need to start assuming that the state money is going to start going away and that we're going to have a lot more, fortunately, independence to make decisions as far as how education and other things are done. So in closing, you know, I would say, look, if it comes down to it, I respect the voters, and, you know, we don't have that right now in office.
Thank you. Mr. Cunningham, 2 minutes, please.
Okay. Let's see. We're talking about this year's budget process and how we worked through that process. And I know the Board of Finance and the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen did work a lot to try to bring the numbers down. I still say that there are other ways we could have actually knocked those numbers down to a reasonable number. But before I even get to that, let me say that I think that there's different ways to have handled that. I know that unfortunately our charter defines what we do. That doesn't mean that we have to continually fall under that same premise of having to go out every 2 weeks and having to go reprocess the whole thing. I think we should have been working with together to go on the 12-month plan. I mean, other towns have done that, where they've actually just deferred and deferred and deferred. And then waiting till the state budget comes out so you have real numbers. Because right now, without that, you're basically, we're in a hole. Besides that, though, as far as what was presented for the budget, I don't think anything in the 5-year capital plan should have been processed forward. I think it should have been held off. An $80,000 lease for a chipper vac should not have been there, period. We can do without that for right now. That's one of the things right off the bat you could see shouldn't have been on there. In the future going forward, that's what I would actually recommend. I mean, if it's a tough year, you hold back. You don't do that in your house. You don't go and say, I'm still going to spend for other things I can't afford. You hold back on that. So with that, I would say that we could have restructured that a little better, in my opinion. There were some other ideas that I came up with during the budget process season that might have been able to save some money. That wasn't thought of either. So hopefully in the future, those voices that are coming from the audience are heard and discussed, and those thoughts are actually processed out.
All right, thank you. We allow 1 minute for rebuttal. Ms. Meyer, should you choose to do so.
Thank you. I think one thing we can all agree on is that the charter needs to be redeveloped. It is long overdue. It's past 5 years overdue a revision, and I think that that's one of the first things that any of us would be looking at this year. It needs to be updated and modernized, and I appreciate everyone's support in that, and look forward to developing a charter revision commission that's going to, or committee that's going to reflect the residents of Plainfield and their concerns.
Right, thank you. Ms. Tendrich, 1 minute if you so choose.
I would like to just address the 5-year capital plan and to state that we do not have a vac chipper. We didn't purchase a vac chipper. But the one thing in our 5-year capital plan, the first year in our 5-year capital plan has already been put and agreed in the budget. So to say that you can't follow the 5-year capital plan, if your first year is already approved in that budget, I believe that you should be able to. Yes, I believe if you have to cut, you're going to cut, just like we did with the chipper. We did not purchase or lease the chipper.
All right, thank you. Mr. Reel, 1 minute if you so choose.
Yeah, I think this idea that the charter is broken is somewhat, I'm going to try to find the word here, not accurate. The bottom line is the charter has a deliberative process. And this year, it was extremely important that we followed that deliberative process, especially because we don't know what the state's going to do. And realistically, going forward, I think it's time to admit that this will not be the first year. We don't have a state budget on time. This is the new norm. So we have to continue going through that process until we have realistic numbers that actually work in the real world. Because, you know, I'm sorry, most people, a lot of people in the town of Plainfield, they are one flat tire away from bankruptcy. So we can't go out and we can't be like, we want this, we want that. We have to do what households have to do. We have to cut. And those cuts are going to be painful, but, you know, reality is reality.
Thank you. Next question.
No rebuttal?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
That's what you get for being a write-in, Mr. Cunningham.
He was sounding intelligent over there.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
I'll make it shorter than a minute. How's that?
Fine.
Okay. The issue of 5-year capital, I would just say one thing. The chipper vac is in the budget. Therefore, it is part of our taxes that we're paying for right now. If you're not purchasing, you're not purchasing. That's understood. But it's still part of what we're paying for. That's the process. So had that been taken out of beforehand, I'd have been perfectly happy with that. Again, 5-year capital plan are the things that you're purchasing for fixing, for upgrading, needs, and I can understand that very, very well. But the issue is that one I just couldn't live with. Sorry.
All right, thank you. Now let's see if I can count to 4. The next question. Ms. Meyer again will lead off. And here's the question. With the upcoming retirement of longtime First Selectman Paul Sweet, there has been talk around the town hall that Plainfield might want to look into hiring a town administrator or a town manager, similar to what we have in Putnam and Killingly, to handle Plainfield's day-to-day operations that require a certain level of expertise that many argue is not always found in elected officials. Do you believe hiring a town administrator or town manager is the right direction for Plainfield to go? And do you believe it is financially feasible? 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Well, there's pros and cons to both. I think that with an elected first selectman, that the people have their voice, A hired town manager, in addition to an elected first selectman, would be an expensive process. A town manager does, however, bring the skills necessary due to education and experience that a leader should have. So that's kind of a mixed bag. We've talked about that for quite a while in Plainfield. I think that if we have a good elected first selectman, one that's got responsibilities that they've handled over the years, that will bring some expertise to the town. I don't think it will bring all of it. It'll be a learning process for any of us. A town manager would have the skills, but not necessarily understand the needs of Plainfield residents as well as an elected official.
All right, thank you. Ms. Tedrich. I'm going to get this right before the time is up. 2 minutes, if you so. 2 minutes, please.
So I have mixed feelings on hiring a town manager. Again, I believe that as a first selectman, you are elected, but you also have to be a resident of the town of Plainfield. And I think to fully understand the people's needs in Plainfield, that you should be from our town, because you have a better understanding of what the town needs and what the people need. Necessarily, if you hire a town manager, it does not mean that that person is going to be from the town of Plainfield. So that's my first probably issue with hiring a town manager. The other thing is, I think as an elected official, again, it's the people's choice who votes in that first selectman. And as far as myself, as a first selectman, you really should have the experience you need, which would be your business experience, your financial experience, your how to deal with people, your everyday running, just like a business. Running the town is pretty much like running a business. You have to be able to communicate with the people. You have to be able to communicate with your department heads. And I think for a first selectman versus a town manager, I think, again, if you're elected by the people in Plainfield and a resident of Plainfield, you're going to have a better understanding of your town and what the town needs. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Reel, 2 minutes, please.
I think the idea of a town manager is horrifically misfortunate, and we should discard it right away out of hand as expensive, unnecessary. And in fact, like if you take a city like Norwich as an example, it's been so proven not to work that, you know, we already know this is a bad idea. The bottom line is, you know, there's a certain degree of common sense, you know, that I think your average person can apply. And, you know, if they are familiar with the town that they live in and they care and invested as I am, you know, we're going to do quite fine without a town manager. What we don't have in Plainfield is accountability. And one of the biggest problems that we saw, especially with this case involving, you know, the referendum petition, is we've got, you know, a situation. Essentially, the town's lawyer came in and said, "Dog ate my town charter. My town charter was locked in a desk drawer for 13 years. Now, if we think that a town manager is going to fix how horrifically dysfunctional we are in respects like that, the problem is much bigger than a town manager. What we need is accountability. We need, like, you know, the buck stops here. We need, you know, here's what's wrong. Let's just fix it. I mean, we don't need a town manager to get in there and have another position that, quite frankly, we can't afford in a situation where, you know, the state budgets are just going to get worse and worse and worse. I not only can I really not justify that, but the idea of a town manager is horrifically offensive. And quite frankly, I think it insults the intelligence of the taxpayer.
Right, thank you. Mr. Cunningham, 2 minutes, please.
All right. Back in 2005, I was in office, and we started up a town charter review, and the commission actually looked at this as one of the questions. One of the things that they came up with was the process. If you look at the other towns around us that have this type of a process, there's two things that are kind of glaring, and it's really stuck out there. Use Killingly as an example. If you use their numbers that they have, and I know it's changed from way back then, but nowadays, if you include all of the costs, you've got the town manager, an assistant, and a secretary. You also are, by the way, you're paying them somewhere in the neighborhood of $350,000 for that whole process to work. You've also got town council. Now, town council is voted on by, we'd have to also make that one up as well, between 5 and 7 members, usually how it works, and then they're paid a stipend as well. So you're not saving anything as far as money goes. As far as managerial process, you still have an elected body who would be giving the direction to the town manager. So you still have a process in place. However, the bottom line is we're not that big. We're not that big of a town, and I do agree that there's some aspects of that work, but really we're not big enough to have that whole process working as long as we have the right person in charge and the wherewithal to know that you have 3 selectmen who are actually bouncing the ideas back and forth with each other. So that's where you're going to have that control and balance. Don't forget, the bottom line is always, as it should be, the public. The residents of the town of Plainfield should have a say in what's going on. So if it's done right, what we have right now, I think, is fine.
All right, thank you. Ms. Meyer, 1 minute if you so choose.
Thank you. I think that the First Selectman model is working in Plainfield, and I do think, however, there are certain positions in Plainfield that may not necessarily be elected. There are certain skills required, say, for instance, by the town clerk or the tax collector, certain certifications. If people don't have that, that's one of the things I'd like to look at. I mean, our town does, but should those positions be hired rather than elected?
All right, thank you. Ms. Tendrich, 1 minute.
Well, the one thing that's nice to see is that we all are in agreement that we don't feel that our town needs a town manager. The only thing I feel is I think we do have a strong first selectman and our second and third selectman, and we do have the opportunity. It's not just one person making the decisions in our town. It's collaborative with the 3 of us. So again, I feel our town really, right now, our needs are being met. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Reel, 1 minute if you so choose.
I would have to agree. Right now, the current model and system we have, I mean, functions. But again, when it comes to the thing we really need, it's accountability. I mean, we have unfortunately had a lot of things that have happened that should not have happened. And I think, the next one of us, I mean, hopefully it's me, when I get in, we have to rebuild a lot of trust. I mean, a lot of people, let's face it, they don't come out, they don't vote. And a big part of the reason is, they don't, have that, belief that their opinion, their voice matter, and, someone is going to realistically look at the numbers and see what works. I mean, let's face it again, the budget is the way it's going to be. And, I mean, if it came down to it, I don't even want to think about the possibility of choosing between, which officer or teacher I have to fire to have a town manager. It's ridiculous.
All right, thank you. Mr. Cunningham, 1 minute.
I think we pretty much all agree with it. It's not the way to go.
The horse is dead, huh?
Yeah. But
No,
I would,
sir, we
I
don't
would
like
say
it.
this.
No, it's still twitching around. Go ahead.
I would say this, that basically, I would, if I was elected, I would still have it on the town charter for their discussion, because it should be something to be discussed. Mm-hmm. They should at least have their say in what is right and wrong. And if they have to, believe me, this was done 10 years ago, but there's a whole new set of people coming in now who are more involved into government. So let them talk about it, let them discuss it, and let them find out for themselves. Give them the information, let them go with that, and let it be up to the people.
All right. Thank you. Let's take a break. We'll be back shortly.